Welcome to Viewpoint. My name is Jim Zogby, and my guest this week is Allan Lichtman. He's Distinguished Professor of History at American University and the co-founder of a prediction system that helps determine the outcome of U.S. presidential elections. The system is described in his books, The Keys to the White House and Predicting the Next President. The system uses what are called 13 keys, and they are each of them descriptors of different seismic plates, I think you'd call them.
Correct.
In the social, economic, and political realm. When 5 or fewer of the keys go to the incumbent party, that is the party that currently holds the White House.
Turned against.
Goes against,
right.
Then that party is going to lose. But when 8 of the keys go to the incumbent party, then that party will win. His system has correctly predicted the popular vote winner in every U.S. presidential election since 1984. And I'm proud to say I've had you on the show making your predictions in every election since 1996.
Right, since we were both 14.
Maybe you, but I was older back then. Listen, thanks for joining us, Allan.
Sure.
And it's interesting. I know that what you're telling me now is that you're not ready to make a firm prediction, but I think that the model itself and the tool you use is so interesting that I want viewers to have a chance to see how it works. So they might do their own predicting as we get a few months into this.
The world's only do-it-yourself prediction scheme.
Let's start with the first one. The first key here is incumbency. After the, it's party mandate. After the midterm election, the incumbent party holds more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives than after the previous midterm election, and that simply is
false. So
let's
that's
look at the numbers.
One
we got
against the party holding the White House, the Democrats. Remember, 5 or fewer falses, they win. 6 or more, they lose.
And so let's look. We've got a board that shows the actual numbers. Here it is.
Yep.
Democrats actually went from 193 to 188. They lost 5 seats.
Ground.
The second key is the issue of, is there a contest? Is there a serious contest for the incumbent party election? And I think early on people were saying no, there wouldn't be. But does the Bernie challenge to Hillary amount to a serious contest?
This is the most fascinating key of all for this year, because nobody expected Bernie Sanders to give Hillary Clinton a truly serious contest. And so far it looks like he might. We don't know yet. There are still lots of big primaries to come: New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, California. But she needs, counting superdelegates, she needs to get approximately 2/3. It's very close. That key hangs in the balance. We still don't know exactly what's going to happen, but so far I've been quite surprised by the battle Bernie Sanders has given her.
And probably won't end until the convention. Whether he's behind her or not, he's going to challenge on platform and challenge on rules.
Yeah, he's got a message.
So we probably have a challenge here.
Could well be. I'm not willing to make a call on that yet because there are too many big primaries out there.
Yeah, let's go to number 3.
We don't know.
And that is there a serious third party challenge?
No, this is just the incumbency.
Incumbency. Sorry. Does the incumbent party candidate, is he the sitting
And
president?
obviously,
the answer is no.
So that's 2
not.
falses and 1 indeterminate out of the first 3 keys.
So the next one, is the third party.
One.
Is there a serious third party challenge? Now, you've had some criteria you've used as to what constitutes a third party, because there's going to be a lot of names on the ballot, as there always is, libertarians and American Independence Party and whatever. What constitutes a serious third party challenge?
According to the keys, you have to anticipate the third party candidate will get at least 5% of the popular vote. And I have the Lichtman rule for that, which is you take the highest point of polling for a third party or independent candidate and you cut it in half. And that's worked almost every single time. So you got to be polling as a third party candidate about 10%. The only third party candidate who might do that would be Donald Trump, if he decides to run as a third party candidate, if they wrest the Republican nomination from him. But that doesn't count against the party in power.
So it's got to be an incumbent that challenges
The incumbent
a
party.
third party that challenges the
Exactly.
incumbent party.
Not one that
so if
challenges
Donald
the
Trump
challenger.
runs, or if the conservatives, as they say, Donald Trump is the Republican nominee and they run a conservative against him, that's not going to count against the Democrats.
Right. So I think that key, no one's going to
Bloomberg would have counted?
Bloomberg would have counted.
counted,
But of course,
okay.
he's taken himself out. So that key is a true.
Short-term economy is the next one.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's going to be
And
a
the question
recession.
is the economy in recession
Yeah.
or not?
It doesn't, it would have to very quickly fall into recession. We're already well into the election year. That one is a true. It's not in recession. I mean, the economy can fall off a cliff, but that's very unlikely.
The next one is the one that interests me. It's the long-term economy.
Right.
Real per capita economic growth
Right.
during the term equals or exceeds mean growth during the previous two terms. Describe that. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah, it means how well is the economy doing. There are lots of measures by which you can assess the economy: inflation, unemployment. I use real GDP, real per capita economic growth, because it takes into account a bit of everything. Takes into account inflation because it's real, adjusted for inflation. Usually when employment is robust, you'll have a lot of growth. And I found it was best to compare it over the previous two terms. And that really saves the Democrats here, because the second term, as we know, of George W. Bush was an economic meltdown, which you had sharply negative growth at the end of the term. So this measure of how well overall the economy is doing is true.
Let me put up a chart for
Sure.
a minute on income, average household income.
Yep.
This is an issue that Bernie's been raising, Bernie
Yep.
Sanders has been raising, and some of the Republicans have been raising too.
Yep.
They don't want to talk about this part.
No, of course not.
But actually, the issue here is that you've had stagnant income growth.
That's correct.
For a significant part of the population.
For 45 years.
And therefore, does this count as a
No,
negative?
because this has been going on for 45 years.
Okay.
You'd have to predict the incumbent party to lose every single time, and as we know, that absolutely has not happened. There are lots of ways you can measure the economy. As I said, you can look at it distributionally, you can look at it in terms of jobs, and this is a big problem, and you might think it would count against the incumbent party, except the challenging party has no answer to it.
Okay. The next one is policy change. The incumbent administration affects major changes in national policy.
Yeah.
Now, tell me.
Obama won that last time.
Yeah.
Because of the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
For decades, presidents have been trying to get comprehensive health care reform. He got it. He won that key in 2012, but with the Republican Congress that he's faced throughout the second term, at least a Republican Republican House, he's not been able to match the achievement of the Affordable Care Act. And this key and all keys go term by term.
But I thought I was going to ask you that. So that if Affordable Care is still in place, has won some Supreme Court victories, and continues to expand the number of people covered, that doesn't count.
It's term by term, and he got the plus for it the last term.
And
he doesn't get for it.
I would think that the most
this term.
diehard supporter of the president would agree that be hard pressed to find a domestic victory.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the
consequence.
the last Congress. It's one of
Yeah.
the most do-nothing Congresses in the history of the country, and we see this because the Republicans have basically said anything that bears the imprint of Barack Obama, we're against, and we're against it sight unseen. And you've seen that with the Supreme Court appointment. Barack Obama could have resurrected Antonin Scalia and nominated him, and they still would have opposed it because it was an Obama nomination.
Let's go to the next one. It's whether or not the social unrest, whether there's sustained social unrest during the term.
We've had sporadic social unrest, protests in Ferguson or in Baltimore, but nothing like the Reconstruction period of American history or the 60s and early 70s when people were dying in the streets. So there's always some degree of protest, but nothing that really suggests our society is being ripped apart.
One might suggest that there is a ripping apart, but it's happening on the other side. on the Republican side? Does that count? For example, Donald Trump says, if they try to take this from me, he warns the establishment of the party, there's going to be riots. He may not be wrong, given the momentum or the sense within the Tea Party that there's a grave injustice being inflicted upon them by the establishment. Would that count against the incumbent party or not?
No, I wouldn't count, if it's just a quarrel within the Republican Party. Plus, as I said, if Donald Trump, and I think there's a fair likelihood he will, runs as a third party, if they take the nomination away from him, that will not count against the incumbent Democrats because it's a division within the challengers.
Okay, and the next key is scandal.
One of my favorite keys, the scandal key, and of course we know there have been lots of presidential scandals in modern history, the Watergate scandal, the Iran-Contra scandal, the impeachment scandal. But Barack Obama really has steered clear of whatever you may think of him. This isn't disagreeing with Obama. This isn't thinking Obama's sending us on the wrong track because he has the wrong policy. This is corrupting the government, and certainly nothing like that has touched upon Obama.
But Hillary Clinton has a Justice Department investigation into her email use and a private server. Does that count if it doesn't affect, if it's not a scandal in the administration?
It's the administration. She's not in the administration anymore.
So if there's an indictment, is that a key against her?
No. Everyone says if she's indicted, she can't run. It's not true.
No.
She can still
I know
run.
she can run, but does it count against her as a key?
It would not, but it would be without precedent. We actually did have one presidential candidate run from jail, but he was a third-party candidate, Eugene Victor Debs in 1920. He got 1 million votes or more running from jail. So we don't know what the effect of that would be because it's no major
but
party
in your
candidate.
model,
but it would not affect my model. But it would change the whole historical context in an unprecedented
why would it not change?
way.
Why would it not be a key if she got indicted and there were evidence of misuse of the email system that was significant enough to warrant an indictment? That would not be a scandal that would harm the Democratic side?
It's outside the keys unless there's one way you can argue this.
Yeah.
If it's tied to her tenure as Secretary of State, then she was in fact, a member of the administration.
Okay, and then it counts against.
And then it would count against. But I think it's unbelievably unlikely that the Obama Justice Department
is going to
in
indict.
the middle of a campaign is going to indict Hillary Clinton.
Let's look at the next.
Something really flimsy.
It's foreign and military failure. The incumbent administration suffers no major failure in foreign and military policy.
Right. And again, that doesn't mean you have to agree with the policy. Doesn't mean that, you could think the Obama foreign policy is way off the mark, but that doesn't count. We're talking things like, the loss of the Vietnam War, the negative turn of the Iraq War, 9/11, major, splashy, tragic events. And, whatever you may think or not of the Obama administration, there's been nothing like that.
So this is a key, the incumbent party wins.
This is a key, the incumbent party wins.
Okay. And Libya is not a major scandal, major disaster?
No, how many people, are concerned with what's going on in Libya? Plus, was that the right or the wrong decision? Who knows? Maybe Libya would have been worse if he hadn't gone in.
Well, next one is a major foreign military policy success.
This is another really interesting
Did they
key.
win any successes in foreign affairs?
I thought they would. I thought, from my perspective, the Iran nuclear treaty was on a level with the Camp David Accords of 1978, a real positive change in the Middle East. But it hasn't caught on. Somehow the American people, maybe because of the drumbeat of negative propaganda from the Republicans, haven't really bought into the Iran nuclear treaty. And so at this point, I cannot turn this key in favor of the Democrats. That could change, obviously, if the Iran treaty really catches on. But at this point, it hasn't.
And Cuba?
And that surprised me. Cuba, we don't know yet. It's too soon. Again, these are things I think are major, but again, it has to be recognized broadly by the public, not just by experts in the field. It's a very problematic case.
And one might
still could
argue
go.
that there was a pall cast over the Cuba trip
Right.
by the tragic events in Brussels.
Absolutely.
So that
right.
if there had been a positive wave created, that got dampened down by a lack of attention, because it was.
As we know, the story changes by the hour, and a tragedy like that in Brussels captures everyone's attention and drives everything off the page.
So no significant failures, but as of yet, no significant successes.
Correct. So this one, right now, while it's still indeterminate because it still could change, counts as false.
The next two are kind of easy.
Yeah.
Incumbent Charisma. The incumbent party candidate is charismatic or a national hero.
Assuming it's Hillary Clinton, absolutely not.
Yeah.
You know,
being the first woman doesn't count.
I thought about that.
Yeah.
But no, because it hasn't really started even that much enthusiasm among women. Mm-hmm. Young women are more enthusiastic about Bernie Sanders than they are about Hillary Clinton. I think actually being the first woman is a problem for her. I have noted.
How about the first 74-year-old Jewish guy?
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, but he's not getting the nomination.
It's fascinating. I saw the New York Times poll yesterday. Not the head-to-head, 50 Hillary, 45 Bernie.
Right.
But are you enthusiastic about this candidate being the nominee? Hillary 31 and Bernie 56.
Yeah. People are not excited by Hillary Clinton. And I think there's a lot of sexism.
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders is always shouting. But the few times Hillary Clinton shouts, she's shrill, she's loud, she's unfeminine. It's hard for a woman to be seeking, the commander-in-chief job. I think it's a big problem for her, being a woman. Mm-hmm. It may not be right on the surface, but there's a lot of sexism under the surface, unfortunately.
And the last key, which is that the challenging party's candidate is charismatic or a national hero.
I don't think Donald Trump's a national hero, and he's only charismatic to that small slice of the Republican Party that's behind him. And, oh, my God, Ted Cruz, just the opposite of charisma. He's the most hated man in Washington.
Yeah.
I read a column either today or yesterday in the Post, which said, if you had told me 6 months ago that Donald Trump would be the front runner for the Republican nomination, I'd say unlikely but not impossible. But if you had told me the establishment was coalescing behind Ted Cruz, I would have told you absolutely impossible. The most hated man in the Republican Party. An absolute snake who only cares about himself and is totally unscrupulous.
And that's not charismatic.
No.
Maybe negative charisma?
Maybe negative charisma, yeah.
Doesn't count. So let's look at a chart. We made a chart here based on this.
Right.
Let's look at it and see what we got.
Yeah.
So what we have are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One short.
One short.
One short. So false mandate, undetermined on contest.
If Bernie continues to give her a contest, that could elect Donald Trump.
Okay.
Because I don't know if this foreign military success key is going to turn. Let's assume for the moment it's false.
Yeah.
So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 falses.
Yeah.
Remember, 6 falses and you're out.
Yeah.
So if Sanders takes this to the convention and really, wins some big states, he's got to win some big states, which is, I'm not sure he will. But if he does that, that elects Donald Trump or Ted Cruz.
Now, every time I've had you on, what your spiel usually begins with is put away the polls, put away the pundits.
That's right.
Okay, explain that. Look, my brother is a pollster.
I know,
doing domestic
I like your
polling.
brother.
Explain what your system does that's different than those who do either the demographic analysis of the voting groups and or the pollsters.
Let me tell you how my system is different. 2 ways. Number one, it's based on the underlying structure of how presidential elections really work. That's why we're looking at big picture things like the economy, foreign policy, scandal, third parties. And because it's looking at the underlying structure, there's a real theory behind it, which is that presidential elections are essentially referenda on the performance of the party in power. The party in power, screws up the economy, messes up foreign policy, they're not going to get 4 more years, and that'll be reflected in the keys. If they perform reasonably well, then they will do well on the keys. So it's based on structure. And secondly, you can use the keys to the White House, not always, but often, long before an election occurs. If the keys begin to line up in a certain way, sometimes they can line up 2 or 3 years before the election. As you know, I called the last election, the very difficult to call 2012 election, years ahead of time. It just so happens this year the keys haven't quite lined up yet, but we'll know that soon. Now, how does that differ? First of all, the pundits. The pundits are talking off the top of their head. They don't have a theory of how elections really work. They only have impressions. And of course, the pundits can never be wrong because they're constantly adjusting their punditry until the day before the election, when they'll adjust it again.
I used to say that if we kept batting averages for pundits on television, they'd all be in the minor leagues because
they'd probably
be batting 200 at best.
In the pony league, exactly. Yeah. And in terms of the polls, I've no quarrel with the polls, but the polls were a snapshot. You know, the pollsters, and I'm sure your brother knows this better than anyone, always tell you these polls are not predictions. A poll taken in March of 2016 is not predictive of what's going to happen in November. It's a snapshot.
Okay, try this one out. What the Democratic Party's been working with as of late is a demographic analysis.
Yes.
They look at voting patterns of Asians, African Americans, Latinos, what are called minority groups.
Correct.
Young voters.
Yep.
And professional women.
Yep.
And they conclude that you got well over 50% of the electorate there.
Yep.
In those groups, and that their voter performance is such that with an 80% at least turnout from, not turnout, but Democratic vote from the minority groups, with Black, Hispanic, and Asian combined, with a certain percentage of the young vote and of young women, Democrats can't lose. There's a sort of a deterministic sense.
Yeah.
Given the numbers,
Yeah.
that's what's going to come out. If it's Hillary versus Clinton, Hillary versus Trump, even if the keys go wrong,
Right.
they say, we're not going to be able to lose this if we turn the vote out.
It's not an unreasonable way of looking at it, but I would answer you by saying demography is not destiny.
Okay.
We don't know what the turnout of those groups are going to be. You know, Barack Obama turned them out. We don't know if Hillary Clinton will turn them out. And how can they predict that? And even a small shift in any of those demographic groups could turn the election, nor do we know what the turnout's going to be on the other side. So I agree that the demographic analysis gives an edge to the Democrats, but it does not give you a reliable prediction and never has.
One last question about the
Sure.
the campaign process, and that is advertising. This would save a couple $2 billion in TV advertising.
Correct.
Because it doesn't matter, you're saying,
That's right.
if they defame Hillary Clinton.
That's right.
Or if they defame, or actually not in the case of Donald Trump, tell the truth
Tell the
about
truth
Donald
about
Trump. It doesn't, this is a deterministic
That's
model.
right. For example, take 1988. Everybody says, you know, Dukakis was way ahead in the polls, and then George H.W. Bush went negative on him with the famous Willie Horton ad of that fierce-looking African-American who went on a crime spree after supposedly being released by Dukakis. Everybody says, oh, that's what turned the election. I predicted that outcome months before that negative campaign ever began. I made the call in the Washingtonian magazine in May of 1988 when Dukakis was 17 points ahead, saying the keys show, despite this illusory lead in the polls, he's going to lose. So it can't possibly be that something that happened 4 months after the prediction could make the explanation. Those same pundits who were saying, oh, that brilliant George Bush going negative on Dukakis. If Dukakis had won, the same pundits would have been saying, oh, that's stupid George Bush. Doesn't he know when you're the candidate of the incumbent party, you can't go negative, you have to have an optimistic campaign. So in other words, no matter what happens, the pundits we'll have an after-the-fact explanation. Look at this last election. If you look at half the pundits are saying Romney lost because he was too right-wing. He wasn't true to himself, right? Half of the pundits were saying Romney lost because he wasn't right-wing enough. He didn't appeal to the Republican base. It's all hash. It's meaningless. It's like you and I, talking about nuclear physics. I could talk about it, but it would be meaningless because I don't understand how nuclear physics really works. The pundits don't understand how elections really work.
One last election I want to ask you about, and that is the 2000 election.
Oh, yes.
Gore had the popular vote.
Yes.
Bush won because of a Supreme Court decision.
Yes.
Basically, he won a 5-4 vote.
Correct.
And that was it. How did you call it, and what did it do to your model?
It was my model came as close to calling an impossible to call election because it's contradictory. I had 5 keys down against the Democrats who were the incumbents, Al Gore. 6 keys and you're out. There was a 6th key hanging in the balance. Remember who was running third party then? Nader. And to turn my model, you have to get 5% of the popular vote. And Nader was polling 5%. But I said, using the Lichtman rule, I'll cut that in half and predict he'll get 2.5. He got 2.7. So my prediction that Al Gore would win the popular vote narrowly was correct. And while Nader didn't get enough to turn the key nationally, he got 110,000 votes in Florida, enough to turn Florida by 537 votes to Bush. So the keys came as close as a human being could come to accurately foretelling that election.
So if I'm out there watching this right now and I'm looking at this election in terms of your 13 keys,
Yes.
there are 2 things I want to watch
2
out
things.
for. One is Bernie,
Yes.
and how long it goes.
Yes.
And the second is whether or not anything on the foreign policy side turns out to be a success.
Correct.
Talk a little about both again, just as we
Yeah.
close, so people
It's
get
not
a sense of
how
that.
far Bernie goes, it's how many votes he gets. In other words, if she picks up about 2/3 of the delegates, counting the superdelegates going into the convention, then the Democrats win that key. If Bernie wins enough delegates to deny her that, counting superdelegates, then we're looking perhaps at President Trump or President Cruz.
Even if you have a contested convention, and by contested I don't mean with the candidate, but over platform issues and rules.
No, we don't count that. That's too subjective because they often fight over that even when there's a clear nominee. And the second thing to look at, can Obama, and this is what Obama should be campaigning on, his foreign policy successes. Can he turn any one of the following into a recognized success? The Iran nuclear treaty, the Paris Climate Accords, and the breakthrough with Cuba. And maybe there's a 4th, truce in Syria, if that works. So there's a lot on the table in foreign policy, but it hasn't been sold yet to the American people.
So your recommendation would be the White House be selling one of those 4 deals or all 4 of them.
Correct. And forget the usual politicking. That won't help.
Well,
So
listen,
if you were Barack Obama, that would be the advice I'd be giving you. Maybe you know him and can pass it on.
thank you, Allan Lichtman. It's a fascinating discussion.
Thank you.
And I hope you found it interesting as you watch this unfold. Remember the keys. You can log in to aaiusa.org or log on to Allan Lichtman's site. Your website is?
The Wikipedia site. That's
Okay, the
where it's
Wikipedia
all-
site where the
yeah.
13 keys are there.
Exactly, just
and keep
Google
track of
13
them
keys.
and see how this plays out as we go forward. It's a fascinating way to look at elections. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week on Viewpoint.